Hello, everyone. I thought I'd take a little bit of time today to record a few moments for the general public, my adoring fans, and or my nutrition students, whoever you are, you might be both, I don't know, to talk about the keto diet because it's so popular these days. Did I say the keto diet? You wish! No, I said the keto diet. So, keto diet. Maybe you can read this. Maybe you can. I'll put it in front of the camera a little bit. There we go. Something like that. Keto or ketogenic. Ooh, the pen I used isn't so hot, is it? Keto, ketogenic. Right there we go. So, same thing, but two names. Keto is short for ketogenic. And the basis of this, in terms of how we split out the macros or the food that we eat if we're on the keto diet, is that you have high fat in your diet, 75 to 80%. That's a lot of fat. Some people go up to that percent. And you also have very low carbs in your diet, less than or equal to 5% carbs in your diet. That's very, very low carb. And of course, the rest you're going to fill in with protein, which also is kind of a small percentage of protein, but that's kind of how things go in terms of the keto diet. So my plan for this recording is I'm going to start out talking about what the keto diet is, and then in the second part, a little bit of the science behind the keto diet too. The second part, I am going to talk about who might benefit from it, because you can find all sorts of claims on the internet, right, about who can benefit and who can't benefit from it. And there is some science backing some of it up. There's not so much science backing some of it up either. And I will be completely transparent about this, that when the keto diet first started breaking ground in the general public and started becoming popular on the internet, I was really skeptical about it, but now that I've read a lot of the science behind it, I'm a little bit more open-minded about it. Don't quote me to say that I think it's good for everyone, because I do not. But I'll get to that. There are some populations that I think it could benefit. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to start out with defining what the keto diet is. Like I said in my little summary sheet here, high fat, low carb. That's just kind of the main hallmark behind it. How does that work out? What does that do to our body when we eat high fat and low carb? Well, let me give you a little bit of the science behind this. Okay, so hopefully this works out. I use the darker pen here. Glucose. See, I have the 1 by the glucose there. Glucose is the main fuel for our body. Okay, so our body needs fuel to do stuff. And I use the term stuff generically because I'm referring to anything you need or want to do, whether it is actual planned movement like exercise or physical activity, that definitely requires glucose, or even just your day-to-day activities like walking around or cleaning the house or just climbing stairs, getting from point A to point B. Another activity that requires glucose is thinking. Or using our brain, which I assume that we do on a regular basis. Our brain is one of the primary consumers of glucose in our body. Or shall I amend that a little bit and say it's one of the primary consumers of energy in our body? So then you might be going back and thinking, okay, if you know anything about the science of how things are broken down, how does this work out? Because carbs are the most immediate food source that's broken down into glucose. So if we're following this plan, where does our body get glucose? Bottom line, it doesn't get glucose easily. So in terms of our 3 macros, if you're talking about the macronutrients, protein, carb, and fat, carbs get immediately broken down into glucose. Fat, proteins, not so much. So then if you're following this keto diet, and you have low carbs, where do we get this? Well, like I said, you don't. Here's the situation. Our body has a secondary source of fuel it can use. Check this. Just flip it over here. In the situation where we don't have glucose available, which would be the case with this diet, our body can use fat as fuel. It's not optimal. It's the second choice for fuel for the body, but our body can use fat. As I have written here, the breakdown of fat has a byproduct called ketones. Maybe you're getting the connection here. Ketones, keto, ketogenic. Yes, there's a connection there. So breakdown product called ketones, and the fat is broken down as an energy source. It takes the body a little bit of time to adapt to use this as a more optimal energy source, but when your body doesn't have glucose available to use to do its thing, whether it's thinking or moving or milking cows or whatever it is you're doing or pushing cars, it will adapt and use this fuel source. And that's how this works. So there's been a little bit of concern in the medical and scientific community, because if you have a buildup of excess ketones in the body, which is often the case with uncontrolled diabetes, I won't get into the science of that here, but people who are uncontrolled diabetics, who don't control their disease properly, often have an excess buildup of ketones in their blood. It makes their overall body, just because of some of the science behind that, it makes their body overall more acidic, which causes a whole suite of medical problems. So that's why a lot of the scientific community has thought, keto diet, no good, because if you stay on this fuel source for too long rather than this fuel source, then it can lead into this state which makes our body too acidic and causes that whole bunch of problems. I have heard some research recently that people who don't have any metabolic problems involving the process of glucose or fat as fuel, in other words, people who are not diabetic, don't go into quite an acidic state so much. So maybe people who don't have pancreatic issues with insulin processing don't quite have that problem. Anyway, so that is the science behind the keto diet. You're switching to fat as an alternate fuel source because you're restricting the glucose intake, basically. And because of that, there's also some unclear science behind how this actually works. The body is trained to use not only the fat you consume as a fuel source, but some of the fat that's stored in your liver and your body as a fuel source. And it is thought, I don't think there's any science that actually backs this up at this point, but it's thought that it's training your body to use its body fat a little bit as a fuel source. I believe that that's the thought. Because there have been some people who have gone on this keto diet and said, I've lost so much weight. All right, so that leads me to my second point. Who is the keto diet useful for? Let me start out by saying that, celebrities all over the internet, maybe your best friend, has said, I went on the keto diet and I felt great after the first couple weeks. My body was trying to switch energy sources and the first couple weeks really sucked. And that's how it is when you're switching from glucose to fat as an energy source and your body's making that conversion. Let me just warn you. Anyway, your friend, your favorite celebrity, whatever, went on the keto diet. They lost weight. It was fantastic. Let me just give you a warning, my statement behind any fad diet. If you have been eating whatever you want, whenever you want, for months on end, if you go on any sort of restrictive diet, whether it's the keto diet or a gluten-free diet or anything where you're keeping a close eye on what you're eating, chances are you probably will be losing weight. And that's just because you're watching what you're eating more carefully, no matter what type of a restriction you're doing. So that's the caveat I'm going to add to that first. What I'm going to say about the keto diet now is the groups of people that it does benefit according to science. There has been research, actual scientific research, published primary literature, showing that the keto diet, having high fat, low carb, has benefited several groups of people with neurological disorders. And being one of those myself, I keep an eye on that. There's been research going way, way back. They tried a similar diet on children with epilepsy, seizure-based disorders. I think it's nearly 100 years ago now. This was before epilepsy medications were actually available. I don't know what actually caused them to try this diet. I don't know what instigated it, but they tried a similar type of diet and it reduced their seizures significantly. So, in large populations of epileptic children, I believe I've heard that the ketogenic diet or something mimicking that, something very close to that, has worked better than a lot of the medications on the market. And hey, you don't have the medication side effects. So, there you go. In smaller studies, I'm talking about small sample sizes, like 10 to 20 people. That's not a huge sample size, but it's a good start. It's been shown to reduce dementia. It's been shown to help people with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease as well. So I say that if you are in one of those categories, talk with your doctor before giving it a try, because it may not be good for you in your current condition if you have other medical conditions going on as well. But it's something to definitely discuss and something to think about. And I'm really looking forward to seeing future research on this. Now, there have been claims, not backed by science, that say that the keto diet gives you strength and better performance and weight loss and things like that. Now, I and other people have not seen scientific evidence to back this up. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Of course, anyone's free to give this diet a try. I always recommend to check with any sort of health professional before you try anything out, just in case you have any sort of medical condition that might conflict with it. But I'm just putting that out there. Just making sure I'm covering everything I wanted to say here. One thing I do want to add to this is, again, with this, one more time, looking at the ratios. When you eat this way, you are coming close to or completely cutting out food groups, because if you're eating low carb, you're probably getting little to no grains and little to no fruit. Both of those are good sources of nutrients. And so you might be totally missing out on nutrients. You're probably not getting many vegetables either. So think of all the nutrients you're missing out on. And for someone for whom this diet might help their medical condition, like someone with epilepsy or something similar, that diet might be beneficial for some time. But for someone who is perfectly healthy and just is doing this to lose weight, I say try something else, at least for now, until we get further research going on it, because I'm not a believer in cutting out an entire group of nutrients unless you absolutely have to for a medical condition or a food allergy or something like that. So, however, I remain open-minded on this because, like I said, a couple years ago when this kind of exploded on the internet, I was thinking, yeah, no, I don't believe in this at all. And then a little bit more research came out showing that it could be good for certain groups. And I'm open-minded to looking at more research that's coming out about this diet, just like any sort of eating pattern, and I think you should be too. So those are my thoughts on the keto diet, and I'd like to hear yours as well. Thank you.